And our mission today is to dive into one very specific, very competitive group from round two. This is Group 24, and it has, I think, a magnificent title.
It's a good one.
The dragons are forced to hand over their beautiful loved ones.
I mean, that title alone.
Yeah.
It sounds strange, but it perfectly captures this absolute collision of genres we're about to get into.
So who are the contenders?
All right, so battling it out, we have Ultra Beatdown by the power metal Speed Demons and Dragonforce.
Okay.
Then we have Ain't Beautiful South from the very lyrically nuanced band, The Beautiful South.
A complete shift in tone.
Total shift. Then Macalla by the ethereal Celtic folk group Clannad. And finally, Hand Over Your Loved Ones by the grunge pop band Wheatus.
Okay, let's just pause and unpack that. We have hyperspeed metal, sophisticated piano pop, atmospheric Celtic harmony, and then a blast of fuzzy, distorted pop punk.
Yeah.
This isn't just a diverse group. This feels like a test of musical thermodynamics. I mean, the friction from listening to these back-to-back must be incredible.
It is. And the question isn't just, what's the best album? It's which album actually survives the crucible of being compared directly, immediately to something so different.
Right.
Because when you force these albums with totally different temperaments into a conversation with each other, their strengths and weaknesses just get magnified. Like a little flaw in production you might forgive if you listen to an album on its own. But if you hear it right after something that's, say, perfectly pristine or maybe perfectly raw, that little flaw suddenly looks like a fatal weakness.
To really get a sense of this pressure cooker of round two, we have to remember these four albums are already survivors.
We are, by definition.
They've already clawed their way through a really intense round one. They've each beaten two other albums to get here.
And that's so key because statistically, the competition in round two just gets tougher. The albums are, on average, stronger.
Yeah.
But it's not even about the stats. It's the sheer diversity of the albums they managed to beat that makes this whole album quest so fascinating to follow.
It really tells you a lot about the listener, Greenstarox.
It does. It shows he values something deeply subjective over just, genre loyalty or what the critics might say.
So I think we should spend some time on how they got here, on their paths to qualification. Because some of these round one results, they're genuinely shocking. They kind of redefine what you'd think of as a safe bet.
Let's start with the one that ended up winning this group, which is Wheatus, with Hand Over Your Loved Ones.
Okay.
This album got through round one, Group 183, by coming in second place. And to do that, it beat two really respected, popular albums, System of a Down's Hypnotize and the more niche rock of Stonefish's self-titled album.
Hold on. Wheatus, the band we all know from that one massive song, they beat a System of a Down album.
Yep.
That is a wild result. I mean, you have the frantic, the socio-politically charged complexity of SOA, and it lost out to the playful grunge pop of Wheatus.
I mean, what does that tell you?
It tells me that melody and, I guess, a sense of fun are valued way more than raw intensity when it comes down to it. For this listener, anyway.
It does. But here's where it gets even stranger. This is where you realize the whole sorting process in round one was just designed for chaos. Wheatus placed second to will.i.am's 2013 album, #Willpower.
What? That almost makes no sense. So the listener preferred will.i.am with its super processed modern pop sound over Wheatus, but preferred both of them over System of a Down.
Exactly.
That result alone just confirms how unpredictable this thing is. It must mean the round one groups were completely random, just throwing things together to see what happens.
Total chaos. Okay, next up, The Beautiful South. Their album, 0898 Beautiful South, also came in second. This was in Group 17. And they knocked out two huge pillars of adult contemporary and new wave.
Who'd they beat?
Crowded House's Afterglow and the massive 80s synth-pop classic Aha's Hunting High and Low.
Wow, two absolute monuments of radio, just gone. Yet the Beautiful South's sort of cooler, more detached sound moves on. That says a lot about the staying power of Paul Heaton's songwriting.
For sure. But they also had to bow down to a heavyweight. ZZ Top's Eliminator took the top spot in that group.
Okay, so you see a pattern there.
A little bit, yeah. You have this heavy classic rock album that's just a global phenomenon. It helped define the 80s. And it takes precedence over three other really strong pop albums. It suggests that while, diversity is here, some albums just carry this extra weight because of their place in music history. It's like a baseline of quality.
Then we shift gears completely to Clannad, the Celtic entry with Macalla. They came in second in Group 124, and they pushed out Corinne Bailey Rae's huge self-titled debut and Blur's first album, Leisure.
Clannad beating Blur, and a massive debut like Corinne Bailey Rae's. That might be the most impressive result we've talked about so far.
It really is.
It just shows you the powerful, almost hypnotic quality of that kind of Celtic music when it finds the right ear. But again, the album that beat them was maybe the biggest electronic music titan of that whole era, Daft Punk's Discovery.
The contrast there is, it's just unbelievable. You have this atmospheric, natural Celtic folk pop versus this super polished, sample-heavy, iconic French house. What stands out to me is that the albums leading these groups, Daft Punk, ZZ Top, Roger Waters, who we're about to get to, they all represent a total mastery of a specific production style. The Survivors, the second-place albums, they seem to represent really sophisticated songwriting that's maybe hidden under a more unconventional sound.
That's a great way of putting it. And that brings us to our last one, Dragonforce and Ultra Beatdown. They got through from Group 173 in second place, and they knocked out 2 huge albums to do it.
Right. They beat REM's New Adventures in Hi-Fi.
A sprawling, serious art rock masterpiece. And Weird Al Yankovic is straight out of Linwood.
So the hyper-technical metal band beats the serious alternative thinkers and the parody genius. But again, they came in second to a critical heavyweight. In this case, Roger Waters' concept album, Amused to Death.
So if you pull all those threads together, you realize these 4 albums in round 2 are the product of just immense genre friction. They survived battles against electronic music, classic rock, alternative legends, and now they face each other. This group is where we find out what's valued most: melody, composition, lyrics, or sheer technical skill.
Okay, let's dive into the deep analysis. And we have to start at the bottom of the pile with the album that got the most vitriolic critique: the heavy metal contender, Dragonforce, and Ultra Beatdown.
Yeah, and before the review even got to the music, the listener goes off on this legendary but actually very relevant philosophical tangent.
This is the Jurassic Park quote.
It is. It's crucial context. He immediately brings up Jeff Goldblum's famous line, "You were so preoccupied with whether or not you could that you didn't stop to think if you should."
And what's so brilliant is how he applies that to Dragonforce's whole reason for being, this hyper-speed power metal. It's a genre that is defined by its excess.
Exactly. The band can play that fast. The drummer can do that relentless double bass thing for 7 minutes straight. The guitarist can shred at impossible speeds.
But the core critique, the failure, according to the listener, is whether they should do all that if the final product is just overwhelming and, ultimately kind of hollow.
That idea, technical skill just overshadowing any real substance, it perfectly sets the stage. And then he connects this sensory overload to this completely bizarre, epic dream he had.
Oh, yeah, the Jurassic Park and space dream. We have to talk about this.
We do. It's amazing.
He describes being on a spaceship trying to hold off this horde of, intergalactic dinosaurs.
Yeah, fighting alongside Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson, no less.
Of course.
While time travelers from the future are trying to get asylum on the ship. It's frantic, it's maximalist, it's completely over the top, and at the end of the day, it's a little bit exhausting and nonsensical.
And that's the perfect parallel for the music. It's an assault of speed, it's over the top, it mimics that same sensory overload from the dream. But once the shock wears off and you're forced to listen critically again and again, the real flaw is revealed.
Massive tediousness.
The review is just brutal. He calls it a bland dirge, cheesy, and says it's way too much for any sane music fan. For people who analyze music, we should ask, what is it structurally in power metal that leads to this tediousness in a comparative listening test?
I think it often comes down to a lack of dynamic contrast.
Yeah.
Power metal, and especially Dragonforce, it sort of operates at 100% volume and 100% speed almost all the time.
Right. There's no quiet.
There's no quiet. There's no ebb and flow that lets your ear rest and sort of anticipate the next big moment. And that relentless speed, it forces the melodies and the chord progressions into these really predictable patterns that, after a few minutes, just induce this ennui. The drumming is meant to be exciting, but after a while, it just becomes a monotonous blur.
So the speed isn't hiding depth, it's just amplifying something that's already repetitive.
Pretty much. And he really struggled to find any high points. He called out the track The Last Journey Home as being Dragonforce at their least worst, but even that was qualified. He said it was only good in a few spots. The reward was tiny.
And then there was Reasons to Live. He admits there's a passable and rather enjoyable guitar section in there. But the key thing here is the cost-benefit analysis of the whole album quest.
Right.
You only get to that one good part after you've endured 5 minutes of what he calls lackluster ennui.
And that ratio is a death sentence in this format. 5 minutes of boredom for 30 seconds of quality. It just fails the test when it's up against albums that are compelling every single minute.
What gives this whole critique so much weight, though, is his personal history with the band. He says he used to own 3 Dragonforce albums,
Yeah.
and the other 2 were the only albums he had ever actively deleted from his digital collection in 20 years.
I mean, that is the ultimate rejection. To actually scrub a record from your library because you just can't stand it being there, it speaks volumes. And then he compares it to what he calls the turd albums he still owns. Albums by Stone Sour, Future of the Left, even Tony Basil.
That's a fascinating point. So if he has such a low tolerance for this hyper-weary metal that he'll delete it, but he'll keep Tony Basil, does that mean he's biased against complexity or just has a high tolerance for novelty and humor?
I think it's the latter, but with a really important distinction. The turd albums he keeps probably offer something quick and easy. Novelty, brevity, maybe some ironic fun. They don't demand serious, sustained attention.
They're short, they're punchy.
Right. Dragonforce, on the other hand, it demands your commitment because of the length and the technicality. But it fails to give you the intellectual or emotional reward. It's a commitment trap. And he concludes that Ultra Beatdown was just a slightly less tedious version of the albums he deleted, but still massively tedious. Dead last.
Okay, now let's make a hard pivot. From that complete disappointment to the album that was the surprise dark horse, the one that became the clear winner, Wheatus. Hand Over Your Loved Ones.
A total reversal.
We go from massively tedious to not tedious at all.
And that contrast is what defines this group's result. Wheatus delivered, and I'm quoting here, playful grunge pop with melodies that cling onto your psyche long after the record stops. It immediately stood out from the pack.
The sonic contrast is really interesting here, too. That also points out that the album is defined by a wall of feedback and fuzz and distortion.
Yeah, which is the complete opposite of the clinical clean lines of the Beautiful South and Clannad.
Normally, that much distortion can be used to hide weak songwriting.
It can, yeah. It can be used for aggression or sometimes, yeah, to just cover up flaws. But in this competition, the melodies on Hand Over Your Loved Ones were so strong, so well written, that they just sliced right through all that intentional static in the production.
Let's get into that a bit more. The distortion acts like sonic static, right? Which means the melody has to be incredibly sharp to even register with the listener on repeat listens. If the tunes were weak, the fuzz would just be noise, and the album would be out immediately.
Precisely. And what this proves is that the listener valued the complexity of the writing more than the clarity of the production. He calls it playful grunge pop, yes. But the fact that it won proves that these are maturely constructed sets of compositions that are just hiding under that high school anthem sound.
That duality, that's the key to it winning. It gives you that immediate hit of youthful energy, that fun, but it also rewards you for listening deeper because the structure is so solid. It satisfies the need for fun, like the Tony Basil album he kept, and the need for compositional depth, which is what Dragonforce lacked.
And the track list proves it. The review points to specific songs that carry it. Anyway, Freak On, American in Amsterdam, and the very aptly titled The Song That I Wrote When You Dissed Me.
And we can't forget the closer, Dynamite Satchel of Pain, which he called epic, weird, and humorous.
Right.
The fact that humor and weirdness are a plus, the same qualities that let him keep Weird Al and Tony Basil in his collection, it suggests that Wheatus managed to combine compelling, memorable melodies with that streak of personality that he clearly values. A really solid, if very surprising, winner.
So we've gone from the extremes of speed and fuzz. Now we need to look at the 2 albums that fought for the middle ground, the 2 that shared that crisp, clinical production style.
The Beautiful South and Clannad. And this was the real battle, right? The fight for 2nd and 3rd place. It tells us a lot about his preferences for intellectual engagement versus just pure aesthetic pleasure.
It does. Let's start with the one that got through, the Beautiful South's 0898 Beautiful South. It was described as having a coolly dispassionate sound. It was ultimately judged to be superior to Clannad, a very solid collection of songs with no obvious weakness.
And its defining feature, especially when you put it next to Wheatus, is that clarity. The crispness of the vocals over those piano pop arrangements. It's a really clean sound. And the listener highlights tracks like Bell Bottom Tear and the classic Old Red Eyes is Back.
But the reason it won wasn't just the pristine production. It was the huge intellectual payoff from the lyrics, the highly metaphorical imagery. The author even admits it took him years to tune into that wavelength.
That admission right there might be the most important clue we have about Greenstarox's criteria for this whole album quest.
I think so too.
Albums that demand and then eventually reward years of intellectual work are ranked higher. That is the polar opposite of the instant gratification of power metal, or even the simple aesthetic beauty of Clannad.
The lyrics here just transform the album from being, simple pop music into this deeply rewarding and sometimes disturbing poetry. We have to look at the examples he gave because they really show the depth of the metaphor.
Okay, let's start with the line from We Are Each Other, where Paul Heaton says, "Remember we went shopping and we went by piggyback."
On the surface, it's bizarre. It sounds almost childish, especially with those sophisticated arrangements.
But it's not literal at all, is it? It's a metaphor for, what, extreme reliance, maybe a kind of arrested development in a relationship. The idea that one person is literally carrying the other.
And then it gets much, much darker with the quote from something that you said, which uses this really jarring, violent image. If you walk into your house and she's cutting up your mother, she's only trying to tell you that she loves you like no other.
Wow. I mean, that is profoundly dark. He's using this shocking, almost horrific imagery to describe the absolute, total, and maybe even destructive nature of love, a devotion so complete it has to destroy any prior loyalty, even to a parent. It turns listening into an act of decoding a dark, cryptic story.
And that willingness to engage with that darkness, to decode that density, is why this album scored so high. It's got a complexity that is deeply rewarding, that sustains you through dozens of repeat listens. It's the absolute antithesis of Dragonforce's tediousness. It's profound intellectual stimulation disguised as cool piano pop.
And beyond those lyrical highlights, the album was just solid all around. Tracks like 36D, The Rocking Chair, We'll Do With You Later. The musical quality was there to back up the lyrical ambition.
And that combination secured second place. Which brings us to the album that came in third, Clannad's Macalla. Now, it wasn't a weak album by any means, but it was unfortunately deemed the weakest Clannad album that the author owns.
And that puts it on the back foot immediately.
It does. But we have to focus on why it lost to the Beautiful South and Wheatus, specifically in this group.
Right, in this context.
The sound of Clannad is all about the purity of the harmonies, drawing on traditional Irish folk. And the author placed Macalla as being halfway between two other, stronger albums in his collection. That middle-of-the-road feel suggests it lacked a really definitive character.
So the final verdict was mixed. Halfway between strong and not so strong. A pleasant, if unconvincing, listen. That sounds like the kiss of death in a competition like this. The high-quality but inoffensive label.
I think that's it. That purity of the harmonies, while beautiful, it also implies a certain simplicity and predictability in the way the music moves. And when you contrast that with the surprising dark lyrical twists of the Beautiful South, Clannad's aesthetic pleasure just couldn't compete.
Were there standout tracks that kept it in the fight?
Oh, for sure. The stronger tracks were Closer to Your Heart, the very famous In a Lifetime, which features Bono.
Which definitely raises its profile.
It does, and Northern Skyline. But the album's strength was kind of balanced out by tracks that were described as just plain. Songs like Bucaille on Urn, Black Stairs, and Journey's End.
So it was that imbalance, the presence of those plain tracks, that was probably the deciding factor.
I think so. It easily beat Dragonforce. I mean, that was a low bar. But it just couldn't match the compositional creativity of Wheatus or the cool, nuanced sound and intense lyrical depth of the Beautiful South.
So Clannad offered a pure, pleasant listen, but it didn't have the complexity or the edge it needed to survive. The Beautiful South was an intellectual puzzle box that kept rewarding you. Clannad was a beautiful, open book that you became familiar with very quickly.
And in a competition based on repeat listening, the puzzle box beats the comfortable book every single time.
Okay, so we have thoroughly dissected these four contenders. The hyperspeed metal that just caused fatigue, the fuzzy grunge pop with the killer songs hidden inside, the complex poetry disguised as cool pop, and the pure harmonies that were, in the end, just too pleasant. Let's review the final fate of Group 24.
The final ranking really does confirm everything we've been talking about.
In fourth place, eliminated from the album quest, deemed massively tedious. Ultra Beatdown by Dragonforce.
In third place, knocked out for being pleasant yet unconvincing, Macalla by Clannad.
Which means, moving on to round 3, our top 2, in second place, rewarded for its intense metaphorical depth, 0898 Beautiful South by the Beautiful South.
And in first place, the surprise Dark Horse winner, proving that composition is more important than clarity. Hand Over Your Loved Ones by Wheatus.
So what does this ranking tell us about the listener's taste profile? We can almost start to generalize a rule set for what succeeds in this album quest.
I think we can. It's melody over speed, it's complexity over pleasantness, and it's intellectual reward over sheer technical prowess.
That's a perfect summary. He consistently rewards strong, complex songwriting, whether it's hidden under a wall of fuzz like Wheatus or disguised by the lyrical ambiguity of the Beautiful South. It's a clear preference for music that holds up to repeat listening because of its inherent quality.
And the fact that the Wheatus melodies could cut through the distortion. That's the key takeaway for the winner. The distortion wasn't a flaw. It was an asset. It was a sonic barrier that only the strongest songs could get through, which just validated their strength.
And the resounding defeat of Dragonforce shows an extremely low tolerance for musical tediousness, no matter the genre. It doesn't matter how fast you can play if the core material is a bland dirge, and it forces the listener to sit through minutes of boredom for a tiny reward.
That's a huge lesson for any maximalist music. And that fight for second and third place, the Beautiful South versus Clannad, it clearly shows a preference for that intellectual reward. The cool dispassion and metaphorical depth of the Beautiful South was just more engaging, more long-lasting than the high quality but ultimately plain material from Clannad. He's looking for something that still surprises him, even after dozens of listens.
And if you look at the albums, they all beat back in round one system of a down, REM blur, and then look at who got knocked out here, Dragonforce and Clannad. The pattern is crystal clear. Technical showmanship and simple aesthetic beauty are valued less than songs that are both accessible and structurally complex.
To win in the album quest, you need more than just pleasantness or brilliance. You need a hook. You need songs that survive the sonic test, or lyrics that demand you engage with them. The winners are the ones who package profound quality in a way that stays surprising under intense scrutiny.
So looking ahead, our winners, Wheatus and the Beautiful South, they move on to round three. And they're going to be facing even tougher opponents, albums that probably crushed their round one groups.
It guarantees an even more rigorous comparison. Wheatus is going to have to hope those hidden compositions can hold up against, genuinely iconic works. Maybe the Daft Punks or the ZZ Tops of the tournament. And the Beautiful South will have to see if its lyrical depth can still shock the listener after hundreds of listens. The quest goes on.